All right, let's get started. Hey everyone, my name is Trent Hazy. I'm from Microsoft Teams Platform Engineering. Really happy that you're here today. We're going to kick things off here in a second, but just wanted to start off with a quick introduction.
Hey, hi everyone, good morning. My name is Avadhesh Dubey. I'm a program manager working with all the customers here, with the strategic customers on Teams rollout, deployment, adoption, and all other activities. And we have, I think you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Aaron Steele, I'm a program manager in the Teams product group, work with Avadhesh and a bunch of his customers.
Yeah.
Move to Teams.
Hi everyone, I'm Rick Shire. I'm also a program manager within Teams Engineering.
And so the four of us will be the folks that you're going to be working with in the ideation sessions later today. But to start off, we have two sessions that really lay the groundwork. So I think after these few hours together, you're going to find that ideation session was the most valuable. But in order for that to be effective, you need to know what's possible. And so that's what we're doing for these the first two sessions, which should take us to about noon, so about an hour and a half. We're really excited to show this, so we should jump right in. Here's the agenda. So first is a capabilities overview. Then we'll take just a quick pause and dive into specific scenarios and examples. That's when we're going to bring it to life. I'm going to show you some demos, some real scenarios. We'll take a lunch break for about 45 minutes, and then that last hour and a half is the ideation sessions. And I'll show you what to expect there, so over lunch you can get the wheels turning. Just to get us started here, I actually want to see a quick show of hands. My guess is that your Teams familiarity probably falls into three buckets. One is maybe you're just getting started, getting exposure and building a basic understanding. The second would be you've been using it for a little while, but you wouldn't consider yourself super advanced. And then the third group is maybe you've been on for quite some time and you're doing some neat things in there. So maybe show of hands in group one, the getting started group. How about two, been on for a while, pretty familiar? And then three, anyone who would consider themselves more advanced? Perfect. So for those who are maybe in step one, I wanted to show you these four categories because when we talk about the features and functionality of Teams, obviously we have chat and meetings. But the three things that really make us unique, and I wanted to call these out because a lot of people show up to a session like this and are thinking about how does this stack up against the other collaboration tools? First and foremost is seamless integration with the Office 365 apps. I think that's really powerful. The collaboration you're doing, the creation can happen in a collaborative way. The second is this customized and extensibility thing, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. When we use the word platform, that's what we're talking about, is extensibility, integrating with other tools. And then this last piece is the security and compliance that you would expect from Microsoft. So those four kind of the basics, and then these three layers on top make Teams what it is. Anything to add?
No, so as you rightly mentioned, so basically I divide Teams as a product in three different categories. Like high level, there are three capabilities are there in Teams. So one is like communication, to make it simple, where you do a meeting, chat, chatting and calling there. And then you have the collaborate, right? So that's where you do conversation in a Teams or working on a file together, doing a co-authoring or co-editing scenarios in a file. So these are like a collaborating scenarios. And today we're going to talk about more on the extensibility side of it, where we'll see that what kind of app integrations we can do. Trent is going to talk about more on the first party, second party, and third party apps which we can integrate, and also line of business apps, which there are custom apps which can be developed in Teams as a platform.
Just first, again, some of those newcomers in terms of what we're seeing in growth. The platform was launched about 2.5 years ago and is the fastest growing business application in Microsoft's history. And today, we publicly announced not too long ago that we have 13 million daily active users. And what that means is that you have so many different types of work being done in Teams. And that is what makes the platform essential, is for all those different types of working scenarios, we need to make sure that they're done effectively and reducing context switching, make sure that there's that seamless integration. Another quick call out is just kind of the diversity of languages and types of organizations. So throughout today, you're going to see a lot of things that apply to your organization. You might see a few things that are maybe not as relevant, but it's because we're covering this wide swath of use cases. So here's the first introduction to the platform and the touch points that we have across the product. I don't need you to remember these. You're going to see a lot of them in action, but this is just to show you that there's a lot of real estate to pull in the tools you're already using. So a bot, conversational, it's going to bring in that information in a conversational manner. A connector, that's going to pull in information perhaps at opportune times. A personal app, I'm going to show you maybe a task manager so that you can manage your tasks in Teams. Graph, that's what we use for your identity. So making sure we know what your title and position is so other people can find you. Tabs, perhaps our most common extensible real estate. That is in channel, and you can add reports and other things there as tabs. The activity feed, making sure you get notified when relevant actions are there. And then messaging extensions allow you to add rich content to a communication. And I'm going to show you all of these as we go.
Have you used one of these capabilities in the platform already?
I'm guessing tabs is the most common, but. So this is another kind of foundational thing that I want you to keep in mind. Today, we really categorize our apps in Teams into two types. One is ready to use, and then the other is custom apps. Ready to use can be a Microsoft application. I'm showing a bunch of them at the bottom here. That second layer that is also available in the store, these are third-party developers that are making these applications and pulling in the workflows and streams that you're doing outside of Teams. And then that last group, this would be things that you develop from scratch. And a bit more complex, but they're ways for you to really pull in custom line of business applications. This is what our store looks like today. And so you can see we've categorized them by the line of business or business unit, and making sure that you're pulling in tools that you're already using outside of Teams, again, to reduce that context switching. This is, again, going back to kind of those three groups and where you are in your Teams usage. I wanted to call out what this maturity curve looks like. So first, almost all of our customers figure out the chat and meetings from the start. And the next thing that we ask them to do is to think through what it looks like to make this consistent and familiar for your employees. So when I show up and I've never used Teams before, but suddenly I see the tools that I'm familiar with, that feels really comforting. I know what the task is or the work item is because I'm using that tool outside of Teams. So that would be step 2. Step 3 is a simplification, which is perhaps using your existing apps in new ways that make things a little bit faster, a little bit quicker, and a little bit more efficient. And then the last step is modernizing, and that means completely new workflows, perhaps new applications. And today I want to focus probably mostly on the simplification stage. Is a lot of things you're already doing, and let's make them just slightly better and boost the efficiency of everyone across the org. So just to bring this to life, I have 2 examples right off the bat of customers who saw big gains by using this platform, the extensibility piece. The first is Dentsu, and I'll let them share in a video of what they saw here. But this was all about adoption. So they were actually moving from the Skype product. They had 30,000 people that they had to migrate over to Teams. And that's a pretty big change. And so they wanted to use the platform and the product itself to introduce that functionality and get people spun up. Pretty cool how they did it. They used a bot. So let me see if we can get this going, and you'll see in their own words how this worked for them.
We're one of the largest media agencies globally.
60,000 people in 170 countries. We had to think really carefully about how we rolled out teams. We didn't have a lot of resource to drive this rollout. We only had a team of 3 people.
By leveraging the third-party tools and the extensibility of Teams, we were able to build a chatbot to help people find answers. How do I do this? Where do I find that?
We didn't have to have a big training team.
And we've only sent 1 communications to announce the move from Skype to Teams. One of the most interesting things that we saw was the viral adoption. People saying, have you seen this product? It works really well.
We started with a pilot of 5,000 users. We're now at 30,000 users. Teams provides many different business benefits. It has rejuvenated other existing platforms and technology investments we had. Teams becomes your front door for everything you do. Changes the game on many levels.
Awesome. And as you have questions, jot them down. We're actually going to keep.
60,000 people.
Let's jump out of that. Write them down. We're going to leave 5 or 10 minutes at the end of each segment to really dive into your questions. There we go. So the second example, and this one we're going to spend some more time on later today, is onboarding. Onboarding is often one of the most painful experiences for employees. It's tough to get the right access to files, policies, set up your profile, whatever it may be. There's a lot of steps, and it's a moment where there's a lot of collaboration points. And so Javi actually used automation to increase the efficiency of their process. It took them days. They were using paper checklists to go through it, and they trimmed it down to 40 minutes. So this is the last video I'll show you, and you can see what they went through in their own words.
Hazy is located all over the world. We have about 9,000 to 10,000 employees.
We tend to use a lot of freelancers. With that comes a lot of paperwork with the onboarding.
The problem with a manual process is the accuracy of the data.
We have to find better ways of onboarding people.
We quickly saw the advantage and the potential of Teams and the Power Apps.
So by automating document processing, we can speed up all paper-based processes that we have.
Before the app, registration process could take 2 weeks. Now we managed to reduce the time to less than 40 minutes.
Microsoft Teams is allowing us to centralize many of the operations, such as SharePoint and messaging, voice communications.
Now we have all those forms, all those documents in one central place, and that central place is Teams. We use Teams all over the world.
Possibilities are exciting for the future.
Teams is here to stay.
So I really love both of those examples because product adoption and onboarding are probably relevant to everyone. Next, I wanted to show you a couple of tools that we have outside of just the store apps that are available today that allow you to customize in Teams. And the first is app templates. In terms of the world of apps here, we've talked a little bit about store apps, and those are available in the store. We also talked about code from scratch apps, so those are the custom apps. But right in the middle, we have this kind of low-code solution, which are app templates. What these allow you to do is grab code, which we've hosted publicly on GitHub, and maybe customize it for your use case. Here are a few examples that I wanted to show you. The first one that we actually use internally at Microsoft is called Icebreaker. And what it does is it grabs 2 random people in a group that you define, looks at their schedules, and says that they should meet. Really powerful for new employees, also powerful at a conference or a venue where people don't know each other. I've found this really helpful at just meeting new people within the org, and especially having a moment with senior leadership that's in there. It's pretty cool to see who you get access to with an app like that. The other one I wanted to highlight is Company Communicator. This could be branded as the Trent Communicator if I wanted to. You can put your own brand on it. And what this does is it allows you to send individual messages to any audience within your org, including all employees. And so rather than posting and hoping that someone sees it, it actually shows up as an individual message, which is really nice. There are also some safety scenarios where this can be really useful. But company communicator is getting adopted pretty fast by our customers today.
And you can actually send it to, if you want to send it to some users or groups, not to everyone, but if you want to specify, okay, these set of groups you want to send that communication to, you can actually configure that as well.
Yeah, great point. The last one is really neat. It's this FAQ Pro bot. And what it does is it'll ingest any question and answer set that you have today. Maybe it's your IT help desk that has a ton of FAQs, but no one reads them. Actually turning it into a bot, you feed it those question and answer pairs, and then it looks at the language and says, oh, this person's having a problem with their display. And here are the answers that we have about the display troubleshooting that you might need right now. When it doesn't have an answer, you can designate a team for a human-in-the-loop interaction. So that question doesn't get answered, it'll go to the right people and make sure that that employee gets the answer they need. Very, very useful for internal help, we've found.
Yeah, even for the IT, for HR, this is a very good template which can be used for, you can fit in some kind of a questionnaires there and the answers there so that people can generally go and talk to the bot and get those answers. Yeah.
So that's all I wanted to share on templates. I wanted to make sure you knew they existed and how they worked. Basically, existing code that you can customize if you want to and tackle some of these use cases.
And it is so easy to deploy, actually. You can just, so there is a link, I think we would be sharing it, that aka.ms.teams app templates. You can just go and download from there. There is a GitHub link as well, and step-by-step instructions is also there. So probably you can just follow that and you should be good with that template.
Yeah, very easy to deploy. One other tool that also sits between the store apps and the custom apps is the Power Platform. So this is what Javi used for their onboarding to automate it and also get away from paper. So the Power Platform has a couple of tools in it, but it's empowering any developer, whether that's what we call a citizen developer, an average Joe like me who's not going to code, an IT developer, or a pro developer. All of those people can use the Power Platform. What it has is it allows you to create an interface, just like this one. This is an inventory example right here. Anyone can use drag and drop tools to create an interface and then capture that in a backend. That backend might connect to one of the 230 different connectors that we have to different data sources, so you can store it or pull it from any location. What that turns into is essentially you have a front end and a back end that you can do anything with. So I'll show you a few examples of what that looks like, but just to show how important that's become for our customers, Satya Nadella was talking about this as a core part of what we're doing as a company. So this is a big priority for us going forward, and Teams and Power Apps are going to be playing much, much nicer together over time. The three parts to think about, and I'll give you a few examples here in a second, are Power BI, which I'm guessing a bunch of you are familiar with. It's the analytics layer and visualizing data. Power Apps, which can be a desktop or a mobile interface, and that's where you would actually capture the information. And then Flow. Flow is kind of a tool to set up logic with triggers so that actions can happen in a certain sequence that you define. So when you combine all three of these, it's an incredible tool for you. This is one example that I was floored by. Owens, Illinois had individuals who were going from machine to machine on the floor and using checklists to log certain metrics. And so they'd look at a dial, they'd record it. Those papers would go back to the desk after about 45 minutes of rounds, and those would then get transcribed and logged and adjusted, and you'd try to look at trends only after they were migrated into a spreadsheet. So what they did is they created a Power App so the individuals doing this monitoring could capture it on their phone. That went to an Excel backend, and then those reports were run about 10 times faster. Really cool to see just the simple gains that you get when you have an interface and you have a backend. This was another really neat example of Power Apps. So Partners in Health, a big NGO, and they had a hard time managing the donation review process. So every time a donation would come in, it had to get reviewed. And so they actually created a Power App to do this, and it sped up their review time a lot. You can see just seeing the amount, kind of creating a simple checklist so that they could, the review individual or the review team would go through these one by one, making sure the fund is correct and that it doesn't need reporting. So these are the types of scenarios where a Power App can be really helpful, where you're not trying to build an entire application from scratch, and simple drag and drop tools can speed things up for you. Here's what it looks like in Teams specifically. I want to make sure that you see what this looks like in Teams. So the first thing I would do is I would click that little circle up there to add a tab. Once I click on that, it gives me a choice of what type of tab I want to add, and here I click Power Apps. As soon as I do that and I choose which Power App, it's displayed in the tab. And then when I click on the action that I want to do, in this case it was a PTO logger, I'm able to have that interface whether it's on mobile or on web. So it's a fabulous way of surfacing that interface. Here's what it looks like on mobile. So just in summary on Power Apps, it's extremely useful to the end user because I'm able to, regardless of whether I made it, benefit from this workflow that's been created for me. As an admin, I'm able to provision it, assuming that it looks good to me and it's kind of meeting my security requirements. And then as a maker, it's incredible to have a low-code / no-code solution to get a workflow done that I wasn't able to do efficiently before. As far as flow goes, I wanted to quickly capture your imagination in terms of what can be automated in Teams. And this is something that is going to pick up a lot of steam in the coming year. And so I want you to know about this because it could make your life a lot easier. So here's some examples. And flow can happen in a bot scenario, in a tab scenario, or a personal app scenario. And I'll show you what these look like. So first and foremost, a flow, as I mentioned, is think of it as a domino chain of events. You define what a trigger is, and then some follow-up happens after that trigger is hit. And so first and foremost, all of your flows would be made available to your team. My flows, my team's flows in a channel, and they can start doing things with all of those data sources that we were talking about earlier. So here are some sample scenarios. The first one is SharePoint file approval. How annoying to jump out of Teams, go adjust the permissions, and then jump back in. You're trying to collaborate over something. Why not, for a selected item, get the profile, wait for the approval, and then apply it in Teams? Here's another good one. A recurring message in a channel, a reminder for you to set an agenda or send a status reminder. One of our teammates has a really hard time carving out focus time. So every day, this logic actually looks for a 1-hour slot and carves it out for them so that they can have some focus time. This one's posting a daily engineering report to a specific channel so that they're reminded to look at those metrics. A reminder to update work items. This is a DevOps scenario, but make sure that you tackle that one thing. So now that I've shown you a handful of the tools that exist kind of in the more out-of-the-box fashion, I wanted to make sure that you had an idea of how to control these things. Because one thing we've found from our customers is whether it's a store app or a custom app or a low-code app, I want to make sure that the right people are getting it and that it's certified for use internally. And so here are a few tips as far as governing apps. The first is in our admin portal, we've got 2 policies that will be really helpful for you. And this is making sure that just like I said, the right people have access to the right tools. So the first one is permission policies. Permission policies are used for access. So what apps are available to which users. And here's the two tools I want you to keep in mind. Are there some org-wide settings if you want to block things or allow things for the entire organization? And then going one level deeper, there's actually the ability to block or allow specific apps, whether those are Microsoft apps, third-party apps, or your own custom apps, down to the individual. So this isn't just applying it to everyone, which was the org settings. This is groups, business units, or individuals can have specific permissions. So throughout the day, we're going to be talking about different scenarios and apps and extensibility points. Want you to know that everything doesn't have to be available to everyone. And we have great controls for you to manage that.
I think this is like one of the example I want to talk about with the app permission policies are, like generally we get a lot of requests from the customers. They say that, okay, they have a different subsidiaries and they don't want to publish that particular app to those users, right? So in those scenarios, I think the app permission policy is good, where you can define that which subset of users will get that app in the teams and which will not have the access to that particular application. So you can define these kind of policies using app permission policies.
And just to bring this to life a little bit more, here's an example. So I created a sales team permission policy because I know that my sales team has these 4 apps. They have licenses for them. And I want to make sure that they have access to these, but they're not distracted by perhaps an HR tool or a finance tool. What I did is I allowed these specific 4, and I blocked all others. And so it really streamlines the availability of specific tools. One other thing that we see is really common is the second one, which is the IT admin test policy. So IT is often going to want to certify an app can be used prior to rolling it out org-wide. And so this is a really helpful tool. I put 3 of my peers in there, and the 3 of us are going to be able to test an app with our own policy prior to rolling it out to the rest of the organization. So the second policy as far as governance goes, this one is more about visibility. Which tools do I make visible? Yes, they have permission to use it, but are they going to find it? That's what this solves for. And what it allows you to do is actually customize the navigation. Today, you probably see a handful of these icons, and they've always been there. But many people don't realize that you can customize this navigation. And so if there's a tool that your group is using daily, that should be something that you pin to this navigation bar. And you can put, I think, up to 11 icons in there. So this can be very, very customized. And this is helpful, again, to reduce context switching. If I think to myself, my team is using Planner, I have to go to the channel, click on the tab to get to what I need to. Well, Planner can be pinned, and you're getting to your tools infinitely faster. An example here, and this is what it looks like, I deleted files, and I replaced it with a ServiceNow bot because my customer service team is going to be using that a lot more than files. So even deleting some of the default icons is a no-brainer in certain scenarios.
And some of the examples are like generally for the organizations who has these like a first line workers, in that case they may be using a shift for scheduling or maybe some other integrations. They can actually, if you can go back to the previous slide, here you can put the shifts here. Or maybe if you want to remove the meetings from there because they don't need it, you want to make it simple, you can actually remove it using the app setup policies here. Or we can take an example of Office Communicator template, which we're talking about. We can actually develop that communicator, you can say the store communicator, for example. And you can actually pre-pin that, we call it as a pre-pinning, and we can pre-pin that application here. So that it is, so this is actually solving the discoverability of applications actually. That problem is getting solved here and people can get the application directly in the client, in the mobile client here or Teams client in the left rail. Yeah.
And then the last thing I wanted to share, and this is perhaps the most powerful, I'll make sure that all of you have access to this. It's a public directory of our audits of every third-party app that exists in Teams. And so oftentimes there's concern about which compliance standards are met. How do they deal with data? Who's the developer? And every third-party app in our library, in our store, has this information available for you. So I'm going to make sure that you'll get a link to the templates if you want to explore those, as well as this audit and security library. So I believe, yeah, that is the end of our quick introduction. So this is the perfect time for 5 or 10 minutes of questions. If you guys want me to go back to anything, I'm happy to dive deeper. Yeah?
On pinning apps to the app bar, is that set through policy, or how is that done?
Yep. So I showed you here. Right there. So there are 2 types, and that would be the setup policy. Okay. So app setup policies are done in the admin. Yeah.
Users be able to customize that as well?
Great question. So I believe that will be available in the coming months, so that at the user level, they would be able to define their own navigation. So it's on its way.
They can in early rings already.
Okay. We're getting close to our full launch, so keep an eye out. How about any of the, we talked a little bit about governance, low code, and then all of the different types of extensibility. Were you all comfortable with those? I talked about tabs and bots and some other things. Any questions on those? Not that you need to be well-versed, but just knowing the basics of how it might work. I want to make sure that you feel comfortable there as well.
Have you used the tab capability in Teams, where just adding just a simple Excel sheet or some dashboard in a Power BI or something like that? Have you tried it?
Yeah. I just have a more technical question. What is the difference between, so let's say I'm using Trello, what is the difference between just adding Trello as a tab as a website versus the actual integration?
It's a great question. So oftentimes, tabs feel like just embedded sites. And so you're wondering to yourself, am I really benefiting from this? Maybe I gain a little bit of reduced context switching, because if I mention that there's a task or a board that someone should reference, they can do 1 click rather than 2. Oftentimes, there's additional functionality. So in Trello's example, I know that there's also a bot. So from a tab standpoint, I don't know that I have a huge win that you're going to gain from that, other than 1 less click, but they usually come with a couple of extra bells and whistles. So one is a bot. The second is a message extension. So you can actually grab a task or a board and drop it into a message. And so those are some things that make the interaction elsewhere a little bit more interesting. And I'll show a few of those today, so you can see, rather than just using tabs and tabs and tabs, how can an app which has multiple capabilities be used? So it's really helpful to see what's possible in the universe of capabilities, because often it's more than just the tab. But yeah, great question.
Yeah, so like some of the applications, like I'll take an example of Jira integrations we have, where you can actually create the incident. So as a user, you have a bot where you can actually create those incidents. And then you have a tab where you can see how many incidents are open in a dashboard. So that's where you can add as a tab. And the third thing is, like, whenever a new incident gets created, you want that kind of alert in your team. For example, I would take an example of IT operations. Whenever there is a new incident gets created, they should get informed. So that is the example of connector, where you can configure with the Jira as a connector. And the last thing, the message extension he was talking about, where as a supervisor, I want to know that, okay, I just want to search with 1 keyword in the compose extension from that Jira database and find out, okay, any request with login related issues. So you can just search with that, you find that item there, and you can just drop it in the Teams chat and ask the person who actually owns it and do a follow-up on that. So that way, it completes all the capabilities which we are talking about.
Yeah. And actually, this next segment will be really helpful, so you can see the way that these are used.
Maybe we can show a quick demo on this one. So
Yeah, I'll do that for you. Anything else before we keep going? Okay, this is the fun segment. So let's jump over here. All right, now we're getting into specific scenarios. And so during this segment, Aaron and I are going to talk a little bit about what this looks like in practice for specific roles. So is it a frontline worker? Is it an HR manager? Is it a salesperson? And how on earth would they benefit from some of these extensible points in Teams? So let's jump over here. The first thing that we wanted to walk through was this scenario. And I want to lay the groundwork here with a bit of a story. So before Teams launched a few years ago, our CEO, Satya, he would open 4 or 5 dashboards every morning that address different aspects of the business. He'd look at these reports and he'd try and identify if there was anything that he had questions about, anything that really alarmed him. And then he would spin up an email, screen capture that part of the report and send them off. So he'd have 4 or 5 email chains going with different screenshots and questions. And those would be conversations that would run throughout the day. What he does today is he goes to Teams. And those reports each have their own channel with the different business units and the leadership from those business units. And the reports are pinned in those channels. So what he does is he goes to those channels, he goes to the report, which is pinned as a tab, and then he'll start a conversation around that tab. So that's a completely different workflow. No screenshots needed, and the content and the conversation are happening in the same place. So that's what this looks like, having a conversation about a specific work item. You can see that this is a tab up there. It's pinned as Contoso. And here's that report. And I can start a tab conversation. So conversations can happen in channel, but they can also happen in a tab. So here is Eric, who kicks off a conversation asking for something about the bugs that have yet to be completed. And that conversation also gets posted in channel. Hey, a tab conversation has begun. So people get notified and they don't miss out. So that's one really simple example of the collaboration that can happen through this type of extensibility. Another one, Courtney, this is going to what you asked about. This is exactly the way I would use a Trello messaging extension. So I'm having a conversation with Kaji. Kaji had a question, and I wanted to say, Kaji, this is about the task in Trello, or in this case, I'm pulling a specific report. But I would do the same thing with Trello is, hey, this task is yours, and I'm not going to wait for you to go to Trello, log in, search for the item, and then realize what I'm talking about. I can just paste it in there as a messaging extension. So those are all those little icons you see below the compose box. That's what we're talking about when we say messaging extension. And some of them are pretty neat in getting you the information you need. Here's, I would click and it would drop in this little report for me. That way I don't have to go anywhere else. The conversation can then be about that report after I drop it in through the extension. This is becoming a more and more common scenario, specifically because it's collaborative. Approvals. At the very least, there's 2 people involved. And so using these dialogues, you can do custom approval flows in Teams. So here you would have this little dialog box. The manager would get the approval. And maybe I'm getting lots of approvals. You can actually create your settings so that you only get them at certain times of day. And they can even be batched. So I got 5 approval requests today. For PTO or expense reports, I can get them at 2 p.m. daily. Pretty nice. The Task Hub. So this is, again, going back to the Trello example. Maybe I have all of my tasks here in tab. But the nice thing here is that I'm able to see the entire team's work, and I'm able to see my work specifically. So I can filter for my tasks. Which can also be seen on mobile. And this task view works as well using Planner, right? So if you've got Planner tasks, you can surface those in here. The Planner scenario isn't as fleshed out in mobile, but works great on the web and on the desktop. Yeah. So task management, whether you're using Asana or Trello or Rike or Smartsheet. These are all products that will have similar functionality to this. Converting a chat. So I wanted to call this out because sometimes someone from outside of your organization brings in information that is only in that conversation. So for example, maybe a customer success person let me know that this customer came out of nowhere, and that information only exists in that chat. I can convert that conversation with the context that was given to me from someone else into a sales opportunity. And these are called message actions. So by clicking on that little ... on the message, there's a section that says more actions. And I could actually convert that into a sales opportunity, which is pretty neat because it brings the context with you.
Right, rather than just copying and pasting your data across, right? Because that's what we're all used to, is context switch. I copy a piece of message, I copy something, I see who it's from, but now I've lost the link to that person, right? So I have to go through all that extra work, that extra, forcing action of creating that sales opportunity, telling me who it was that gave it to me, to give them credit in the sales tool, and all that stuff. When you integrate it in this way, you get that richness of that connection.
Not to get too far off track, is there, within the teams, is there a way to automate the creation of the teams through like an Excel upload or somehow? Because we're just starting to learn how to use the Teams app. We don't have a lot of, we've got a big team, but not a lot of people have actually adopted it. So for me to go through and say, okay, I've got, company-wide team and then sub-teams within there. And
So
cross-functional teams.
Really quick, just to repeat for those who aren't here, the question is there a way to automate the creation of teams?
And yeah, we have and are launching more support for Teams templates. So a template at the Office 365 level, you as the admin can go and pre-provision a bunch of teams for your users using a template. You also have the ability to script that through PowerShell, right? So if you know the structure you want to create for your users, rather than wholesale giving them the ability to create all the teams, but you want to populate some teams for your admin, from an admin perspective, you understand the scenarios you want to enable first. You can go through and create those teams for the users, create the channels you want, add the people to those channels. Very scriptable, and then we have these templates that are also in the portal.
Yeah, and Matt, just to add on to that a little bit, there's actually templates specific for retail.
Yeah.
So like some recommendations of what we think the channel should be for a retail store, for example, and then what we think one should be for the store manager.
Yeah.
So we can follow up on that.
Yeah, maybe that gets too much of a nuts and bolts of our use case, but okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked because I'm now going to go into an onboarding scenario. I mentioned this is usually the most painful experience for a new employee and an HR team. This example is going to use a couple of platform touch points, and I'll call them out as we go. And for each of the examples from here on out, I'm going to be using a generic application, but I'll keep in mind that there are a lot of third-party apps that already do this functionality. I just didn't need to seed them in your brain because I don't know what you use. So if it's a CRM, we'll integrate with most all of them. If it's a generic tool to start, but keep in mind it most likely can be done today out of the box. So here I am. I'm a new employee, and I get welcomed by HR Tools, which is a bot. The bot says, hi, I can take a tour, sign in to authenticate, and once I'm authenticated, it says, oh, hey, I know who you are, Rita. Can you quickly edit your profile? I'll click on Edit Profile. It has some of the basics, but I need to add my photo, so I'll quickly do that. And once I have my photo and I've filled out my complete profile, I'll click Save.
And you'll notice those things are official HR portals, right? It's not that I'm filling this stuff out in some alternate directory or something else. It's these people have to do this anyway to get their W-2, to get their HR information, to put that in for official purposes. You're just going to leverage it in a way that makes that a little more native for that new person, so they don't have to get the email from their boss that their boss created 6 months ago when the last time somebody hired, but you can always make sure that that guidance that HR wants to give to those new employees is current.
Yeah, great point. This starts getting really fun because often we're asked to make an introduction that can be dropped in a channel so other people know who we are. If the bot can trigger an introduction and use one of these handy little dialog boxes, I can type my introduction there, and it can be saved for review and compilation, which I'll show you here in a second. So the bot sends perhaps a handful of things, the introduction being one of them, but can also add payroll, parking, health, all the essential setup. So here's the HR manager after I did my introduction, and you can see what they went through. There were 4 new employees who started this week, and I'm going to review the introductions that they sent me.
And this could be an HR manager, it could be a team coordinator, right? So you've got an admin assistant for the team who deals with onboarding those new people. It could be any of those scenarios. That those things are just the roles in the team as it was deployed.
Great point. Rita actually wasn't sure how to make an introduction, so I need to give her feedback before I approve it. So I could give her a little tip before I approve it. But then once they're approved, I can schedule them. And these introductions might go out for those individuals 9 a.m. on 7/19 to this specific channel. And boom, welcome new hires. Here they are. I can scroll through them, see their introductions, chat with them if I want to, but what an awesome way to get introduced in a channel with the peers who started that week and with a little introduction and an easy way to connect with that person.
And I could totally see extending this out to adding those people into a few teams based on the team they've joined, right? So you know what team they've joined because you know what role they were in. Take that and extend it out to populate those people in that team as that admin assistant or as that admin role.
Let's see. Another thing that we see is really common is just making sure they have the basics at their fingertips. A company tour would show them a little bit about the company, a link to payroll, a link to healthcare, a link to policies. Just make sure that it's all there and accessible. And of course, we need some GIFs and emojis to welcome everyone. A policy change is also part of this onboarding process that I wanted to show you. So here the NDA policy changed. I get a little notification up in the top right from that app, and it says, hey, I need you to review this. If you go in, you're able to read the policy or watch the video, and that becomes a little bit more of a personal way to receive this than just another email. So making sure that the HR tools is pulling in the relevant content related to that work stream. The nice thing is because Teams works so nicely with SharePoint and other document-based tools, that document can actually be displayed really nicely in Teams.
We see a number of customers sort of building this in with LMS platforms to do similar things. So they're integrating bots and tools and tabs to LMS platforms to make sure that people just know where those things are to get the learnings that they need as a new employee or as continuing employees as things change.
All right, now we're moving into the frontline worker scenarios. I think we have a few folks thinking about retail scenarios, so I'm going to show a few of those. There's, I think, a barista in here, but apply it to your business specifically. So this is Daniela punching in. She's got a shift. She arrived at 7:50 for her 8 o'clock shift, and the Contoso bot sends a proactive message to her reminding her to punch in. So here's what it looks like as a card on mobile. Asks her to punch in and shows her her shifts for the day. After adding that punch, it'll then show the card for May 9th today. And then she's able to change jobs if she wants to. Maybe she wants to move over to the store associate position for the afternoon rather than being at the cashier all day. So change jobs, switch it up, save, and now she can move on in the afternoon to that other role.
The idea being here, I know that in some roles, in some retail situations, depending on the role you're doing, there are different pay rates, right? So we want to support that scenario rather than just punching in for the entire time on a single pay rate. You can change the role. That data then gets exported out, imported into your payroll management system, QA'd, whatever it is, reviewed, and it supports those scenarios.
Let's see. Seeing your full history is really important. So showing the punches, this is done at the day level and then expands if you want to see what type of work you were doing on that day. Really, really helpful for a mobile worker like this. My schedule, let's click on that and see what happens in the calendar view really fast. Just moving forward, maybe you want to see next week, making sure that we're giving full visibility there. Here's what a swap looks like, a shift swap. Pretty neat to see what happens when Kaji realizes that she wants to go to her daughter's school play. She checks and sees that that late shift goes till 8 p.m. and that's not going to work. So what's she going to do? She clicks swap shifts, and once that goes up as an available swap, some of her peers, like Josh, can actually see and make an offer for that swap. Kaji, a few hours later, is going to see she actually has 3 potential swaps. That's the left screen. And she can pick the one that works best for her. This is the Wednesday one. And once that is submitted, Sarah, her boss, gets notified that the swap has been requested, and she can approve it there as well. Want to make sure that you also see the manager scenario. What does it look like to be Karen to actually assign the shifts? And so she's a retail manager, and she needs to make sure that those shifts are covered. And so this is a scenario where we're going to use the desktop and a tab to do that. So I'll show you what that looks like. Here's what the shifts assignment might look like from a tab view on desktop. And she can see that on Wednesday, there's 2 open shifts. And she wants to get out ahead of that and make sure that those get filled. Right now, it's currently assigned to Josh, and that's not going to work. And so she's going to assign it to these 4 other individuals and hope that 2 of them can take them on. David got asked to fill that slot, but actually he's done that shift a ton this week, those night shifts, and so he's going to decline and actually spark a conversation with the manager and make sure that she knows why he's declining. Serena is available to pick it up, so she accepts. And then Karen, on the other end, gets a notification of what's been happening as people have been viewing it, and she can go see now that the status is full. Clicking into it, these are the individuals who took it on. So moving away from the frontline worker to a sales scenario. So Sarah is a salesperson. She works remotely. She's in the field. And so she starts off with a daily digest, and that digest has 3 things in it. It has her quota attainment, so that she can keep an eye on that. It has some actions to take, pulling from her task management. And then it also has, it's pulled from her calendar, so she knows what meetings she has that day. By viewing those meetings, she can go in if she needs to reschedule. We're also looking at the conversations that she's been having and making sure that she doesn't let things fall through the cracks. Something like, hey, you talked to Tom about that contract. Doesn't look like that there's been a follow-up there. Make sure to keep an eye on that task. The nice thing is, and Avadhesh was talking about connectors as a way to be informed in the moment when something happened elsewhere. This is a perfect example. In her CRM, one of her colleagues marked one of her deals as closed. And she's not in the CRM because she's driving or headed to a meeting. Well, she can get a proactive message that says, hey, Acme company was closed just a second ago. And then by clicking into that, she can see the CRM information and perhaps kick off a conversation there to get the full picture.
And this could be everything from that sort of custom integration with your CRM app to something like a flow, receiving or reading a notification from a web interface of that app and processing that change into Teams, even as as complete as adapting that card and making that card rich and usable.
As soon as that deal closed, she also needed a follow-up on that report for her quota. So she's moved up a little bit, and now her little dashboard in Teams is showing her how that's changed. So now for some more fun stuff, I wanted to show you a real example. I'm going to show you 4 different interfaces within Teams. And so again, for those who are familiar, you'll see right away that my navigation looks a little bit different. I've got activity and Teams and chat just like everyone else. My calendar and calls are in there as well, but I've got a few other icons that I've pinned in there using setup policies, which we discussed earlier. The first thing I'm going to show you is tasks. And so tasks, this is what we call a personal app. And I'm keeping track of my personal tasks in here, just making sure that they're on pace, making sure they're assigned to the right folks. This could be any of your project management tools today. So whether it's Trello or Asana or Planner, this type of interface is going to be common. The next thing I wanted to show you is training. So an LMS or a video portal, these can be really nicely, adoption can be really nicely driven by pinning it here, making it more accessible where people are already collaborating.
You can actually add your stream channel where the recordings are there and add as a tab to the training, whatever trainings you're getting delivered.
Yep.
So those channels also can be pinned as a tab.
Yep. Next, I'm going to show you a bot scenario. So my company uses ADP, and I've set up this bot. I've already authenticated it, but it's going to allow me to request this information, especially when I'm on the go and I can't remember where it's stored and how to get to it. I really just need to see my pay from last week. So I'm going to click on My Pay. Oop. Did that log it? Oh, there it goes. Did it twice. And boom, there it is. I can see my take-home pay from a few weeks ago. I can see the deduction list, which is really helpful if I wanted to get a more granular view. There it is. Good old taxes. I'm going to go back to help and see what else I can do, because I want to make sure I've got my full view. Well, I haven't gotten a full view of my time off recently, so let me see what my balance is, and I'll click on that. Cool. Good to know.
You need to take some time off.
Yeah, it looks like I have 1,000 hours of vacation available. Some work to do here. So this is just a classic example of making information available where the worker lives.
So Trent, is there any customization is needed for this ADP thing?
No, this.
That's the point I want to make.
Yep, this is, so long as you're an ADP customer today, this is free out of the box and requires 2 clicks to install. So really, really simple to get set up here. The last thing I wanted to show you in here is my absolute favorite. So we talked a lot about simple Microsoft tools that can help you do your work or your peers' work more effectively. This could not be simpler, but the outcome is so, so powerful. And it's using a form and a dashboard. So what I wanted to do is have each of my store associates log 4 questions or 4 answers at the end of their shift. And as soon as I do that, I can start seeing trend data. So let me show you how simple this is. Here's what my form looks like. And it's optimized for mobile, so it looks a little chunky here. But hey, what store were you in? What's your sentiment at the end of the shift? What product were you working on today? And perhaps a topic area if you wanted to give some feedback. So I said 4 questions. It's about 5 questions all in. This takes 30 seconds for me to finish. And suddenly I have a pulse on my workforce. Let me show you what this looks like. So
this could totally be beyond a pulse, right? This could be a post-shift report that you enable for your associates as they're working in their retail scenarios, right? They need to fill out a transition report. I'm ending my shift. I need to tell the next set of workers the things that are still an issue, the tasks I didn't complete, the things I did complete, whatever that, I had a list of tasks that I was supposed to get done today, and I need to make sure that that information gets passed on so people aren't surprised when they come in.
Yep. And so here is our shop number, 246, and the management team of that specific store is here in channel, and I've pinned my insights dashboard so I can keep an eye on this. And here's what it looks like. This seems so simple, but I can't imagine how powerful it would be to be a store manager with this information. So first and foremost, I can see by product concerns, positive feedback, and I can drill into it. So hey, who are these people that are having a good experience with this? What are they saying in their feedback? Who are these people? Where are they located? And so slicing by all of these dimensions gives me such rich insight, and it's crazy how simple that form was to go from there. So all of the filtering that you expect in a Power BI dashboard is right there at your fingertips by just using a form.
And this doesn't have to be sort of locked down to IT-driven scenarios as we're talking about this, right? One of the things you saw in there was retail associates as you're rolling out your new point-of-sale system. You want some feedback from them, that what they've seen, because your managers aren't there seeing what the checkout experience looks like every day, right? But if you're rolling out a new self-service point-of-sale system or a new point-of-sale system, and you want to get that near real-time or real-time, every day, end-of-day report, what did you see? Is that rollout going well? Is that rollout going poorly? You can integrate that right into Teams. You don't have to send them an email for follow-up. You don't have to send them anything else. And they can just do that interaction right there while they're ending their shift.
Yeah. And it's pretty neat to see the solutions that get surfaced when you have trends. Like you can see the percent of positive feedback by date was in the 50s, 60s, and then it looks like we solved something. In the last couple weeks, everyone's been happy. So just seeing what's happening and getting that granularity at the store level is a huge, huge win from a management standpoint. All right, let's go back here. So just because we've been using generic apps to illustrate our scenarios, I wanted to show some specific things from our store today so that you can wrap your head around, hey, there might be some tools we use outside of Teams already that I can pull in. So here are a few examples. The first one is task management. So hopefully some of these names are familiar to you, but they're all in the store today and can be used out of the box. Here's what Asana looks like, very similar to some of the task management that we saw with tabs. They allow you to take actions, changing a due date, marking it as completed. So this isn't just consuming, this is reacting actively. DevOps, a lot of tools there, as you might expect. But here's what Jira looks like. And this, we were talking earlier, has message extension. So hey, there's a work item that is delayed and I need to have a conversation about it. Let me paste that into the chat and off we go. It's not just that tab view. There's Bitbucket. This is another great example of a connector. Hey, a merge just happened.
Code review, right? This is code review right in Teams.
And there's Jenkins. Viewing a build, making sure that things are looking okay. Customer support. Here are a handful that we have today, from Salesforce to Zoho. And here's what Zoho looks like in a tab view, actually viewing the tickets, replying to tickets, putting them in the right channel, makes it really clean that the right people are responding to the right types of tickets. Again, with personalized notifications, we want to make sure that you're not getting bombarded. HR. We saw a bunch of scenarios earlier, whether it be onboarding, introductions, policy changes, but I wanted to show you one really neat one, which is an end of week survey that just gives you an insight into how happy people are.
I really like QB for this. It's a really nice way to do this.
Yeah, yeah. So how nice to just respond with a quick emoji, how was my week? And then suddenly I can start seeing as a manager, what is the performance and sentiment looking like across the board? And this just allows you to listen and respond, take actions, and depending on how much time the individual has, they can go deeper into explaining and sharing why they're feeling the way they are. All right, so these last few, just because I know retail is top of mind for a handful of you, I wanted to show you, this is kind of our last bit of scenario thinking on what types of things are going to be done in teams. So the first is just pure communication, making sure that I'm responding to the right people, maybe I'm sharing my location to meet up with a peer, capturing an image and notating it. This is the rich type of chat scenarios that are possible in teams.
Beyond that, one of the things that we really like to emphasize about this is its secure nature. So images that are taken inside of the Teams app are not dropped into the device's photo library. You can always insert something from the library, but if you take a picture using the camera in your Teams conversation, it's only in Teams, meaning it's secure. You've got confidential information. You don't want it put on that person's device. You want it in the Teams app that you're managing so that when you manage that device and or they leave, it's gone with that app.
Awesome point. Access to the employee portal. So this is becoming really essential because that portal has so much information, and accessing it in Teams, either with a messaging extension, you can see that I'm pulling a travel policy maybe for a new employee, or just getting notified that, hey, an article has changed or something has changed, keeps me up to date, and it's answering these types of questions like how am I accessing company information, company news, and am I actually keeping an eye on these things?
When travel policies change, people need to know, as we've just learned.
Recognizing. This is such a big deal, and there are free out-of-the-box solutions. One is called Praise. Just making sure that people get recognized for the great work that they're doing. I had an awesome experience where one of my colleagues in store did something amazing for a customer. Let's capture that in the moment and make sure that they get recognized.
From an HR perspective with Praise, as an example, a lot of the third-party apps are way more rich than our inbuilt Praise, but we are working on that inbuilt Praise reporting and monitoring stuff so you can get that report at an HR level. It's just not there today, just to be transparent.
Here's onboarding again, putting them in the right team, using the FAQ bot, which we talked about earlier. That's that app template, making sure that they can ask questions and get the responses quickly, and then Icebreaker, making them giving them the opportunity to connect with peers they wouldn't otherwise.
Icebreaker is honestly one of my favorite apps that I've seen us put out there beyond Company Communicator. It's an app that if you've got large teams or teams that are merging, right? So let's say you're closing down a team or merging two groups who hadn't formerly worked together. Put all those people in a common group, put the Icebreaker bot to work, and you as the admin simply set up how often those people want to get asked to meet. They don't have to meet, they can ignore, they can give you feedback. If their life gets too busy, they can pause that interaction and get no invites for a little while.
Yeah. Here's general employee support. So seeing my leave, which you saw me demo, getting access to those policies again, raising concerns. There might be a venue to make that accessible. And then setting your quiet hours. That's huge, and just making sure people know when you are and aren't available.
And that quiet hours is also about just letting that person unplug. So even if you've got a salaried employee who, their working day is potentially whenever, but you want to support that work-life balance, making sure they, as they're using this Teams app, know how to configure quiet hours for the hours they aren't going to be at the office, so they can simply turn off those notifications.
And I believe this is our last one here, but just managing my duties. So that's reminding me of shifts, checking in, swapping, picking up additional work, and my time off requests. Really easy when all of that can be done in the same place.
And we're one of the things that's being put forward with shifts in the first line worker scenario is the ability as well to add tasks. So a task checklist to that worker of the thing. You know that a retail associate, beyond their task of handling customers, has these 4 things. They also need to, check the shelves, do these levels of restocking, do these kinds of other things about checking inventory, whatever it is. You can plug those right into that task. They're standardized things. You then have the ability to see that they've done it and pass that along.
So that is the end of our, didn't realize that was animated here. Oh, there we go. I want to give you a little bit of a preview of where we're headed after lunch so that you can wrap your head around it, and then we'll jump into questions. But we are going into this ideation session specifically thinking about people. And so we're going to start with processes and then go into the people that are experiencing those processes. And we're going to be collaboratively with your ideation leader working on a persona just like this. And I worked on this one recently. This is Lynette, who works on demand generation. And so we're going to get into the work that she does. Who does she depend on and who depends on her? What deliverables she's expected? What are the redundancies in her work? Who is she collaborating with? And then what is she currently using as her solutions? So those are all the types of questions that we're going to be thinking about. And what it does is it sets the stage for us to think through, in your business, what are those pain points or situations? Opportunities that can be turned into efficiency gains, where that pain gets removed just a little bit. And in order to do this, we have to think about real people and real processes within your org, and that's why we're going to be splitting up. And we're all going to go to separate rooms and have this discussion. At the end of the ideation session, you will not have one of us tell you, here are the 4 ways to solve that problem. We're actually going to go home with this as homework. So we're going to have a better understanding of who is experiencing this and what the scenario looks and feels like. And then we'll be able to come back to you and say, hey, actually, there's 2 ways that you might address this, and let's talk them through and see if we can get you over that hurdle. This doesn't mean that we're going to be pushing Teams as the only solution. To be honest, there might be scenarios where Teams is not the right solution for this pain that we identify, and we'll tell you that. But at the very least, this is going to be a really fun way for us to identify things that can be improved, and we might find a solution in the next week or so to actually solve that. So whether you start with a specific business process that you're frustrated with or a specific person that you work with that you think could use some help, both of those are good ways to start thinking about this, and then we'll get together at 1 o'clock to dive into this together. So with that, what questions do you have about either the scenarios we walked through or the ideation session that's coming up?
So talking about the first line associates earlier, so along the lines of the quiet hours, from an administrative point of view, can you limit access by time or location for thinking of like hourly associates?
When you say limit access, do you mean give them a time window when quiet hours are allowed?
No, prevent sign-in to the app during off-shift hours.
So that is something which I think if there is something that should be done at the identity side of it, like that's where the authentication is happening. And I think in AD you can do it.
See, right, you can do conditional access types of things where they can only sign in when they're in your building and on your Wi-Fi kind of things. The other way we're thinking about this is not necessarily, so it's an interesting discussion, right? Because should a person be paid just because they're signed in, or are they getting paid because they took an action, right? So it is an interesting discussion, but at a very core level, the easiest way to solve this is that conditional access situation where when they're not on your Wi-Fi, their sign-in doesn't work. Any other questions?
On this ideation sessions?
Do people understand the idea of personas and why we're building this and everything? Good. Last time we had a bunch of IT folks who didn't really get why personas matter. I think we've got lunch, so if people want to go ahead and grab lunch, there's space out there, or you can come and sit back at your desk and do the work that you've been missing for the past few hours.
And then we will all convene in here at 1 o'clock, and that's when we'll break out, and you'll be paired with your ideation lead, and we'll go from there.